It's a beautiful summer day here at Chicagoland Speedway in Joliet, Illinois, right outside of Chicago. Practice underway on this mile-and-a-half track where the Nextel Cup teams have been racing once a year since 2001. Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Burns alongside Larry McReynolds and Mr. Fireworks himself, Jeff Hammond. Boys, the clock is starting to tick in a big way now. Just 8 races remain to get in that top 12 in the chase for the Nextel Cup. Larry Mack, a week ago, Jamie McMurray got a big win, made up 135 points on Dale Earnhardt Jr., who did not have a good night.
Well, and that's what I've been looking at all week long since we left Daytona. Remember, we're exactly halfway through the 2007 season. 18 down, 18 to go. But as you mentioned, Steve, it's 8 races to the chase at a lot of different racetracks. And the way I see it, I don't mean to shortcut anyone because a lot can happen in 8 races. It looks like it's a 15-man race, a 15-team race for those 12 spots. And the unique thing about those 15 teams, guys, I don't really see any of them that's really running bad right now.
Good point. Now, Jeff, how does this racetrack, the Chicagoland Speedway, factor into this equation?
Well, Steve, the key thing is right now, you take a look at Jamie McMurray already. He's coming in here with some momentum, which is very important. He ran well, set on the pole out there at Infineon, didn't have the finish he was looking for. But this team right here is on a roll. It's a great time to peak. The guys on the team said, hey, we love coming to Chicagoland. We feel like we're going to run well here. It's a good racetrack for Roush Fenway Racing on top of everything else. And this racetrack, I believe, you know, because of its speed, the shortness of the race, it really is going to factor in as one of those tracks that could be one of those variables, you know what I'm saying? Well, like Larry's talking about, those top 15, whoever has the best day-to-day can carry it right on in Indianapolis. We're getting ready to come up on a weekend off. Again, I think that's going to be something that everybody's going to be looking at as well as looking forward to. But momentum out of this weekend over that weekend off, I think it's going to be huge.
Guys, the only driver to win more than one Cup race here at the Chicagoland Speedway is Kevin Harvick. Matt Yoakum has more on the driver of the 29 car.
Steve, this weekend takes on even greater importance for Kevin Harvick. Yes, he's won here twice, but when you look at this season, it's been more like a heartbeat monitor. High points, low points. They're trying to get some good momentum. We've got an off week next week, and then it's the stretch run to the chase. He lost a spot in the championship standings. One of 4 guys in the top 12 who had some movement last week, but he couldn't come to a better place. He won the first 2 races here, and then he got off the schneid here at Chicago after a rough stretch and scored a top 5 last year. But this weekend, they think that 1 is on their side. When you look next door, they've got the 0-1 of Mark Martin, and then on the other side, they've got the 1 of Martin Truex. And by the way, this weekend, they're in garage stall 1-1, number 11. They hope for some good things here in Chicagoland. Ralph Shaheen?
Well, Matt, the number 20 of Tony Stewart is feeling pretty confident coming into this race this weekend. They tend to run pretty good here. And also, they're more of a second half of the season type of race team. That's when they tend to really gain their momentum. Today, as they begin practice, they're going to focus on race setup right now. They're using the baseline setup that they ran the race with last year. They're going to see if that works here pretty good in the beginning of this session. And because they're comfortably in that top 35 in points, they're not going to worry about a qualifying setup till right near the end of this session.
And you know, Ralph, what's interesting about this 20 car right here, almost everywhere we have raced, the old current car that we're racing here, the end of last year, and most of the mile-and-a-half, 2-mile tracks this year, Greg Zipadelli, Tony Stewart, they've had this one favorite car that they broke out. But what the 20 car did is they tried to duplicate that car. That car that Tony Stewart will be racing here, it's a car that just this year has had 5 different bodies and 3 different front clip designs, but they feel like their last trip to the wind tunnel of that 20 car, mission accomplished. It did duplicate that car that is his favorite.
Well, folks, if you don't live on the internet like a lot of us do who prepare for the races, news today, it was official out of Hendrick Motorsports, where Dale Earnhardt Jr. will drive next year. Budweiser will not follow Dale Jr. over to Hendrick Motorsports. Rick Hendrick citing that because of their sponsorship lineup, they had a conflict there, so Budweiser will move to somebody else's team in 2008.
We've been talking about that all along, that, you know, the way things stacked up over Hendrick Motorsports, once again, a lot of sponsors already in place. And I think a lot of people, including Dale Earnhardt Jr., may be looking for the redirection as far as his image is concerned. Budweiser's been a great sponsor for him, and they're a great company to work with. But as they say, a lot like leaving DEI. It's time for a change and maybe just a total clean start all the way around.
And Budweiser, too, released a statement as well from Tony Ponturo, one of their marketing executives, that Budweiser will remain in the sport. Ray Evernham has talked to them. Ray admitted that, but Ray said there's 4 or 5 other teams that are talking to Budweiser as well.
And this is not unusual. And I've been asked a lot the last couple of weeks, you know, is Budweiser not tied to Dale Earnhardt Jr.? We're sure. They have poured a lot of marketing and promotion into this young man since his rookie year back in 2000. But as I was thinking earlier this week, and I'm sure there are more situations, Steve, but the only 2 real significant sponsors that I know that stayed with their driver when Richard Petty left Petty Enterprises, STP moved with him to Mike Kerr. And then most recently, when Dale Jarrett left Robert Yates Racing and went to Michael Waltrip Racing, UPS followed him. It's unusual, though, that the sponsor moves with the driver.
Yeah, because they're separate agreements, Jeff.
Separate agreements all the way around. But right quick before we were getting off the 8 car, I wanted to bring up one thing about Dale Earnhardt Jr. and that 18 is that he is right there barely hanging on, and you mentioned it earlier, in the clock ticking. These guys have got to dig in and kind of like bow their necks a little bit to be able to hang on to that 12th position. Otherwise, they're going to get shoved out. And hopefully, you know, with all these announcements, it doesn't kind of like take some wind out of their sails, because they did struggle at Daytona, didn't run quite as well as, you know, really expected them to. I know they got caught up in some other people's issues, but, you know, it's important they come here and kind of turn things around.
Casey Mears has 4 Cup starts here at Chicagoland, a best finish of 9th in 2005. He'll be a teammate with Dale Earnhardt Jr. at Hendrick Motorsports.
And you talk about those 4 starts, Steve, all of those have been in the top 15 as far as finishes, too. I mean, that's what's important right there is, again, he starts up to the front.
Yeah, he does.
He won the Busch race here a year ago. There was a little bit of fuel strategy, but he had a great race car, and that race car right there, that's the car that he went to victory lane in the Coca-Cola 600 in May at Lowe's Motor Speedway.
Very similar layout, 1.5 miles. Reed Sorensen in the 41 car.
A guest tonight on our trackside show.
I was going to say, there's a little bit of pressure on Reed Sorensen.
Why?
David Stremme and Juan Pablo Montoya will be going to the Cubs game Monday.
Okay.
And Reed's going to throw out the first pitch.
No.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
and
no.
the last time he was there.
No, don't. He can't do it again.
He said he got booed. He didn't even make it to home plate. He bounced it.
It's like this here. I either got to give him E for effort for going back, or D for dummy for doing it again. Which one should it be?
Maybe we could work with him tonight on trackside.
Well, and I talked to Reed this morning, and we were talking about that, and I said, Reed, I hear there's more to this story. I hear that your teammates, David Stremme and Juan Pablo Montoya, they will be joining you at Wrigley Field.
Yes.
And during the 7th inning stretch, the 3 of you guys will be singing Take Me Out to the Ball Game. He said, Reed Sorensen doesn't sing. I said, so what are you going to do? He said, we think we're going to let Montoya handle the whole singing.
Oh, me. Maybe you should sing it in Spanish all the way through.
Yeah.
They'll never know if he's got the words right or not.
Right.
And Larry, I'm proud of you. You got it right, my friend. It is Wrigley Field, not Wrigley Stadium.
Oh, boy, you don't want to do that up here.
No, sir.
That's not a good thing.
Johnny Andretti, the quickest early in practice. We'll be right back to Chicagoland. Back at Chicagoland, the yellow car to the right, that is Ricky Rudd, as Larry Mack circles it in the 88, being held for 15 minutes after being late for inspection a week ago at Daytona.
And this seems to be becoming pretty standard. And, you know, they used to do the same thing to us even back in the late 90s. And my attitude, Jeff, was even though you tried your best to be ready when they wanted you to be ready, whether it's getting ready for qualifying or race, is like, you know what, I'm worried about this week. If you got to penalize me next week, I'm not going to put this car through inspection early just to keep from being penalized next week if there's something I have to do on this car.
But the key thing right now is if something is a problem, NASCAR will work with you. But if you're just dragging your feet, that's what they don't have no part of. They'll get all over you about that. And Ralph, I'm sure there's other stories down in the garage right now besides about the 88.
Oh, yeah, it's never ending. We're going to talk about the pair of ones now, the number 11 of Denny Hamlin. The car's a little tight on throttle, but that's not the really big issue for Denny right now. He's a little bit more concerned about his driver's area, his cockpit, where he sits, and how he has the feel with the steering wheel and making that car work. And you know, getting that just right is a really tricky thing. And guys, I know we're going to talk to Matt here in just a second, but maybe you guys, when we come back to you, can chat a little bit about what you have to do and how tough it is, Matt, just to get that driver comfortable inside that car and what a big difference it can make.
It's all about comfort for that driver so that confidence stays high. And for Paul Menard, one of the go-or-go-homers, he had an issue in the right front, had a tire rub. They worked on that problem. They feel like they have that taken care of. He's 5th fastest so far in the session, working only on qualifying stuff to try to get this car in the show. Out of the top 35 in points, and basically he gained 16 markers last week on that, just trying to get this team in a good position so they don't have to worry about trying to make it in on time week in and week out. But right now, this car 5th fastest here at Chicagoland.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And we need to point out 49 cars here for 43 positions.
You know, back to what Ralph was talking about, Denny Hamlin, this 11 car, as I talked to this group this morning, try to wander through the entire garage area on Friday morning and ask the different groups which car you have here. This car is a brand new race car, but it was raced at Michigan back in June. And Jeff, it's almost like possibly something is showing up here that Denny doesn't like that didn't show up at Michigan the first time they raced this car.
And it's always an ongoing, you know, concern with I guess you might say the driver's office. And you know yourself, Larry, when you work with drivers, you try to overemphasize the fact, get down in that thing, sit in it in a while, and try to let us know what we need to make you more comfortable. Because if they're not comfortable in that race car, they will not give you good feedback. They'll be too busy worried about the fact I'm not comfortable rather than worried about whether the car's driving right. I know when we used to work with Darrell Walton, I could make a seat adjustment from time to time and pick up as much as a half a second if the car was not right and not to his liking.
I know for sure his teammate Tony Stewart is that way. Greg Zipadelli told me the same thing. We can make a seat adjustment that he likes, pick up 4 or 5 tenths on the stopwatch without touching any other part of the race car.
Well, DW used to drive the number 11. He also drove the number 17. There's Matt Kenseth for Roush Fenway Racing. Kenseth
successfully, I might add.
Yes, and Matt Kenseth has led laps in each of the last 3 races here at Chicagoland. Led 112 a year ago, 176 back in 2005, where he finished 2nd, his best finish.
Can you believe that this man's getting ready to have his 275th start this weekend? I mean, Matt Kenseth, you know, past champion and everything, but it just doesn't seem like Matt's been around that long to run 275 races.
Made his first start for Bill Elliott back at Dover years ago and
finished in the top 10.
Sure did, 6th.
But you're right, Steve. He has done everything but win here. He's led more laps than anybody. Actually, the total is 292. Last year looked like he maybe had the car to win the race, but things kind of got exciting over in turn 2 late in the race.
He kind of, let's see, well, how was it? He backed into somebody, didn't he?
I'm not sure on that one. Right now, he's 33rd quickest in this practice session.
And you can believe right now they're working on race setup in that 17 to get it to where it'll hook up and go come race day.
Well, driving in here from O'Hare Airport, I've seen about 3 billboards that has big red all over it.
Yep. Exactly right.
It's getting tight, but still, you know, rear still. It's a lot better getting in. Gets tight in the center, but the rear still moves coming out the corner.
Now that's Juan Pablo Montoya talking to Donnie Wingo. He has never raced here in anything, and right now he's run 13 laps. Only 2 cars that's run more laps is Jeff Burton has run 14 laps, and Tony Stewart has run 16 laps. So trying to get a lot of seat time for Juan Pablo Montoya. Only practice session prior to qualifying, an hour-and-a-half session here.
And this is not what you call an easy racetrack, Larry. We were talking about it earlier. You think it looks a little bit like Charlotte, maybe looks a little bit like Atlanta, but you don't drive this racetrack like you do those 2 right there. You actually get out of the throttle maybe a little bit early, Steve, kind of float it back into the corner and then really mat it hard down through the center and exit the corners.
I think it's very unfair to call these 1.5 cookie-cutter racetracks. They may all be 1.5 miles, but that's where the similarity ends.
I think every driver in that garage area would tell you the same thing. And Matt Yoakum talked about Kevin Harvick a while ago, who's won here twice. Kevin had a great description of this racetrack. He said, you roll out well before you get to the corner, but you're maybe on the throttle throughout the entire corner, including the middle of like turn 1 and all the way off in the same down in 3 and 4. You're on the throttle a lot at this 1.5 mile racetrack.
My main man right there, cousin Carl. Great run last weekend at Daytona. Finally got him a top 10 finish. And, hey, Ralph, what are you caught up with now down in the garage area?
Well, you know what? I know, Hammond, with you and Larry Mack, when you guys are riding around in your Rolls or your Bentley, how you guys are, you got those 14-way adjustable electronic seats. You got to go down a long drive. You just make a couple adjustments, that seat gets a lot better. But you get guys like Steve and I who don't make the money you guys do. We're riding around those Yugos. We're kind of stuck dealing with the pain in our back. Well, it's kind of the same situation for these race car drivers. They spend thousands of dollars getting those seats custom made, but once it's made, there's no adjustment. So sometimes you got to do it the old-fashioned way. Apparently, this piece of foam was really bugging Denny Hamlin right in the center of his back. So they just cut it out. But now they got to go back in there, just put some tape in there and hope it lasts. And maybe that 500-mile ride will be a little bit nicer come Sunday.
Hey,
they just cut this out.
Now, wait a minute, Ralph. Let's see. When you took me home from the airport a few Sundays ago, we rode home in your Cadillac. And when you got me home, I think my 2001 Ford Expedition that just turned 130,000 miles was in the way. You couldn't get all the way in the driveway.
Now, here I am being a nice guy, and I give you a ride home. You got to throw me under the bus like that.
But the thing is right now, for both of you guys, I'm still riding around in a Honda station wagon. I mean, so give me a break.
And that's the truth. It's a Willie car.
It's a Willie car. Jimmy Johnson has jumped to the top of the speed charts. There's Booty, Barker, and team debriefing. We'll be right back. Tomorrow, the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series reigns in Kentucky. With Hornaday chomping at the bit and Musgrave back in the saddle, Mike Skinner will need the extra horsepower to hold against the untamed tailgate brigade. The NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series live tomorrow, 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific, only on Speed. Casey Kane heads down to the apron, into the garage. Not very quick early in his practice. 42nd out of 47.
Think he's having a yak attack?
Yes. That's a vitamin water reference. You haven't seen the commercial, but meanwhile, let's go to Matt Yoakum.
Steve, a close call for Dave Blaine to the New Hampshire upholsterer. This is the right rear tire. You can see he has cut that right rear. He came on the radio after exiting turn 4. He said, boys, I believe we have a right rear possibly going down. And sure enough, that's exactly what it was. The car tight early in his practice session. One of those guys that has to qualify in on time. He's 178 markers in the car owner championship standings, out of the top 35. So much like New Hampshire, he's got to lay the hammer down and get a good, solid lap later on this afternoon.
Matt, the good news is he's 7th fastest on the charts right now. See him talking to his crew, the Buckeye Bullet, right, Larry Mack?
And I tell you what, he was the Buckeye Bullet when they dropped the green flag last week at Daytona. This was one of the cars we talked about it the entire 3 days down there with an impound race, how guys and teams like the 22 had to qualify with that qualifying setup where everybody else on the race setup. Tommy Baldwin, very aggressive with some serious changes the first few pit stops. He got to the top 10, ran in the top 10, and then had that little bit of minor damage, ended up finishing 23rd. I think this team right here, they're just about to turn the curve, and I think one reason is the addition of Tommy Baldwin over there.
Well, as Ralph reported, Denny Hamlin just not comfortable in this seat, but they're back out onto the racetrack.
We've talked a lot about this this year with Denny Hamlin, the FedEx car. Yesterday, he visited the Children's Memorial Hospital over in Chicago. He raced some remote control cars with the kids and then presented a check on the behalf of FedEx to $26,000. Plus, then he was presented the helmet with the paint scheme that's designed by the kids. This is the 6th of the 11th helmets that Denny will wear this year as part of the Wear Your Heart on Your Helmet program. And then at the end of the year, all 11 of those helmets will be auctioned off with the benefits going to the Victory Junction game camp.
And those helmets are all designed by children in the hospital.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's what makes it special.
Great campaign, and I just want to know which one you guys are going to be bidding on so I don't bid on the wrong one.
We'll get together.
All right, that sounds good.
From Denny Hamlin to Jeff Gordon in the 24 car.
Yeah, last year's winner.
A little different paint scheme. Now this is the
Turn
same.
in is good, but as soon as I get down in there, I'm pushing. Can't pick up the throttle because it just gets worse.
And that's something we will hear. We're doing every one of these practice sessions here on Speed. That's something I think we're going to hear throughout the entire weekend. It's the real challenge at Chicagoland. We talked about it. You're carrying so much speed, it's almost like you just... the laws of physics takes over. You just can't get the thing to turn around these corners, and I think that's something we'll hear. But now this is the same race car that he won Pocono with last month.
And the thing is, Larry, we keep talking about it, how you get out of the throttle here early, but once you get down that turn, you need to get back that throttle very aggressively and get it to run off the turn. And that's what Jeff's having trouble with right now. He wants to be able to pick that throttle up and stay in it all the way off the exit of the corner, and he can't do that right now.
Jeff, David Rudiman in the 00 car from Michael Waltrip Racing. Of the cars in the go or go home boat, he is 4th fastest, overall 14th in his Toyota.
And the thing is right now, as we take a list at the guys, take a look at the guys who have to qualify on time, I remember back whenever David was driving for Joe Nemechek and Nemco Motorsports, he came to this racetrack early on, and he took to this place. I mean, this is a really good racetrack for him. He knows how to get around it, so I'm not one bit surprised to see him up there really in the top 15 as far as fastest and speeds, but more importantly, up there in the top 4 of the go-and-go homers.
Now, Steve, you talked about at the top of the show, the clock ticking for the guys trying to make the chase for the next Cup championship. Matt Yoakum pointed out that right now, Dave Blaney, that 22 car, they're 36th in owner points, but they're 175 points from 35th. Now, this goes all the way to the checkered flag at Homestead Miami Speedway. Go back to last year. Kyle Petty, the 45 car, Sterling Marlin, the 14. They were battling all the way to the end of that race to get that 35th position. What makes that important, you know you go into 2008 for the first 5 races and that you will be locked into the show, most importantly including the 2008 Daytona 500.
Dale Jarrett looking for speed, just 46 out of 48 drivers who have been on the racetrack. Jimmy Johnson is the quickest. Back to Chicagoland after this. Back at Chicagoland, Jimmy Johnson, John Andretti, and David Stremme leading the way here in practice. Kevin Harvick, as Matt said, the only driver to win twice here on this mile-and-a-half track. Now, we talked about the mile-and-a-halves not being cookie cutters in all reality. Now, there's a great look going down the backstretch at how that backstretch has a hook in it.
You know what that would almost remind me of, guys, is Richmond on the front stretch. It's a big sweeping kind of arc right there, but it's not. It's the, like I say, it's the backstretch here at Chicagoland. And again, this is another one of those things that makes this place not only so fast, but so tricky as far as getting down into turn 3, because you get off of turn 2, make a good run down through there, you're carrying a lot of speed into turn 3.
And boys, here's the reverse look from 3, looking back down the backstretch into turn 2.
And I've talked to a lot of the drivers, read a lot of the driver quotes. They said, honestly, the speed you're traveling here, you almost don't even realize that that backstretch has a curve in it. And remember, this is a mile-and-a-half racetrack with 18 degrees of banking. Jimmy Johnson set the track record 2 years ago at 28.701. That's average 188 miles an hour around this place.
Ryan Newman in the 12 car. He has a pole and a win. Pole coming in 2002, the win in 2003.
And that's one of the guys I talked about at the top of the show. Right now, he's 14th in the points, but he's only 61 points out of 12. Dodge does not have a car in the top 12. I think their last hopes is Ryan Newman in the 12 and his teammate Kurt Busch in the 2 car.
Well, Matt Yoakum, the 2 car has not been on the track yet. What's the story on that?
Well, 48 cars have taken time in the 49th. The 2, like you mentioned, of Kurt Busch, something amiss in the engine. They found it, fortunately, but the bad news is that they're going to lose a lot of time during this practice session. One of those guys trying to get inside the top 12 in the championship standings, currently 15th. On the bubble as his teammate Ryan Newman pulls in. You can see we've got different members from Penske Racing South helping out, but this is going to be a time-consuming deal for these guys here.
Matt, can you find this out for us? Since this race car has not been on the racetrack, will this change be an approved engine change, or will this be considered unapproved where no matter where he qualifies, he'll have to go to the rear of the field? If you could find that out for us, that'd be something interesting, because this is an unusual situation. They've not even been out of the garage with this yet.
Basically got through the inspection process. And Matt, do you know what's going to happen there?
Jeffrey, it is an unapproved engine change.
Oh, man.
So when he qualifies then, I think then evidently, Matt, the rule must be once you present your car through inspection, that's the engine that has to stay in there. So when he qualifies today, basically it will be for pit selection only, because you obviously pick your pits by how you qualify.
But the good thing about it, sitting on the pole of the front row here as far as being able to get a win is not important.
You can pass here.
You can pass.
Ralph, what's going on with Kurt's brother?
Well, younger brother Kyle is having a much better practice session here on Friday morning. This car's been pretty quick. They're very comfortable with their setup for the race. So they're already making the changeover, guys, to get ready for some qualifying runs to see how they are in qualifying setup. And, you know, when you talk about it, it's really not as drastic a change anymore as it once was, is it, Larry?
But, you know, Ralph, the biggest thing, and I was chit-chatting a little bit here with Steve when you were talking about that, and I know this is not on the subject you were talking about, but when I think about Kyle Busch, and I saw him yesterday at the airport, and it's almost like I wanted to take him off to the side and just say this to him. But you know what? He's got to figure this out. Is you have an opportunity to win more races this year. You have an opportunity to make the chase. You have an opportunity with this race team to win the championship. Don't get caught up in all this, who's my teammate, who's helping me. Just focus on these last 18 races, and you know what? You may end up being the top guy at Hendrick when all the smoke clears at the end of the year.
Yep, he said he's a little unhappy after the race at Daytona, said that he thought Jimmy Johnson and Jeff Gordon should have helped him out a little bit more. I say it's every man for himself.
Exactly.
Hey, race day fans, we're looking for photos. Show us your colors of speed for a chance to see yourself on race day. We'll select the best photo and show it on air. It's all part of My Race Day. Upload your photos to speedtv.com. Keyword My Race Day now.
Hey, can we go back and kind of put a period on the yak attack when we were talking about it a minute ago? A little bit more about
After your obscure reference.
I think they've got a cute commercial out with the vitamin water he endorses right there. But that whole deal, him getting in that race with a guy and calling his yak slow and everything, yes. I just think it's humorous. I really do. I mean, I can just see Larry Mack written all over it.
I want to go back and put a period on this race team from Daytona. What a well of a job Kenny Francis and that group. They were involved in that crash on lap 4, the first caution. They kept making repairs to that 9 car, and who would ever believe that would only be his second top 10 finish of the year, finished in the top 10 in both Daytona races this year.
Tony Stewart has quite a record here at Chicagoland. He's led laps in 4 of the 6 events. One here in 2004. In all, he's got 4 top 5 finishes.
He used backup cars, though, 2 years in a row here. In 2004, when he won that race, and then also in 2005 when he had a practice crash, and still came back with a good, solid top 5 that year.
Was it 2005 when J.J. qualified for him?
Exactly.
They took Tony to the hospital?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he likes this racetrack. Speaking of liking the racetrack this weekend, what do you think this man here felt like when he walked in the garage area this weekend, coming off that fantastic but very, very close win at Daytona last week? I mean, it was a great effort right there by Larry Boy and his whole Roush Fenway team.
Second closest win in NASCAR history
exactly.
Since they've been doing electronic timing and scoring.
Right behind another, I guess you might say, lost by a real close teammate with that deal with Darlington with Kurt Busch and Ricky Craven.
Yep.
But, you know, the whole Roush Fenway group should be proud of last week. When I looked up there with 4 or 5 laps to go, and I had a conversation with Robbie Reiser this morning, and 4 of the 5 Roush cars were lined up on the top side. Like Robbie told me, he said he looked up with 2 to go, and he said either it's going to be real good or it's going to be real bad. And then David Reagan had a great run, finished in the top 15. So a great day in general for Roush Fenway with the Fords at a track that normally the Chevrolets seem like they prevail.
And I think working together that night, I mean, it was either a night where teammates were good or teammates were bad when you think about it. In this case here for Roush Fenway, those guys really worked well together. I got a chance to cover the Carl Edwards car, and the way he and Bob Osborne and the entire number 99 team worked to get their car where it needed to be and then get up there right at the end, I think make a difference as far as, you know, getting in between, you know, the guys and helping his teammate win. And I wonder what these 2 guys are talking about.
Would it have anything to do with probably a wreck from Daytona that Jeff Gordon was not involved in, but Denny Hamlin and his teammate Tony Stewart was involved? Actually, Denny and Tony running 1-2 when that wreck happened, fairly early in the race.
Now, the question I got for you, though, is Jeff consoling, or is Jeff trying to maybe stir up a little bit more controversy between the 2 guys? That's an old Darrell Waltrip trick, is go over there and say, hey, buddy, what happened to you guys last week?
Or he walked over and said, did you hear what Tony Stewart said about you?
Exactly.
But just remember, that's the 2 guys right now that are first and second in the points. But Jeff Gordon, with 8 races to the chase, has a 277-point lead over Denny Hamlin. And remember, that's even after the 100-point penalty from Infineon. Jeff Gordon can give up roughly 97 points a race for these next 8 races and still be in great shape.
But I think he's looking for some insurance right there, Larry. Playing a little mental game right there, because, again, he's got to race this guy in the final 10 races, and that could be what he's setting him up for. Take a look here at what happened between Tony Stewart and Denny Hamlin.
You know, Tony said that Denny checked up. In other words, he got out of the gas a little bit coming off turn 4 there. My question is, were they racing too close at that point of the race? I'm not pointing blame. I'm saying, were they racing too hard that early?
Well, you know, racing close at Daytona pretty much is a normal thing. And there was no question. It looked like the handling was starting to go away on the 11 car. But it was almost the reverse of what happened to this man right here, Tony Stewart. As you see Greg Zipadelli talking to him, go back to the Daytona 500. Very late in the race, Tony's leading the race. Kurt Busch is running second. Tony gets loose. Nothing Kurt can do but gets into the back of Tony.
And it happens so fast at a place like that. And I also want to point out, when you think about cars being loose, think about what happened to Kyle Busch. On one lap, through one corner, he got so sideways twice that people said it was stupid loose, and that was the driver making a comment back to the crew. And he saved it, but there was nobody right behind him either.
We'll take a break. Jimmy Johnson still the fastest here at Chicagoland Speedway. They'll qualify later this afternoon, and you'll see that here on Speed. Jimmy Johnson, the only driver to post a sub-30-second lap here on the mile-and-a-half Chicagoland Speedway. He's got quite a record here himself in 5 Cup starts. He's never finished worse than 6th. Got a win in the Busch Series here. Jimmy Johnson did. And we transitioned to Austinville from Dawsonville, driving the 21 car, Wood Brothers JTG.
Talked to Bill the other day. He was coming into Charlotte, Lowe's Motor Speedway. His son Chase running at the summer shootout there. And I said, Bill, you know, how's this deal going? You still just taking a race at a time? He said, well, that's all I'm really doing. He said, we finish the race, take the checker flag. I say, guys, you want me to come back next week? And they say, yeah, why don't you come on back? He's really enjoying racing, I think, with the Wood Brothers.
Scott Riggs in the 10 car right now. He just changed on the speed chart, just jumped up to 7th from 18th.
Well, I can't say enough about what this team and this whole group right here need this weekend. They need a huge shot in the arm, and that is just a matter of getting this 10 car back on the starting grid come Sunday morning. A lot of rumors right now about Scott Riggs and what's going on over at Evernham Motorsports.
And this is going to be a team, I think, Matt Yoakum, it's going to be a reach for them to get to the top 35, even with the 18 races to go, but these 3 did not qualify, Matt.
Absolutely, Larry Mack. And you've seen on the scoring monitor so many different teams working different agendas. While Riggs is just trying to get into the show, the 26 of Jamie McMurray, they are still working on their race setup, looking ahead to Sunday. They're going to make one more run, and then they'll swap over to qualifying mode. But this is a team, their agenda is trying to lock into the chase. They're in that bubble area, 12th to 14th, separated by just 61 markers. Right now, his car is just too loose on entry. They're making a shock change in the rear and going back on a previous change in the front to see if that helps.
All right, thank you, Matt. David Reagan in the 6 car, teammate to Jamie McMurray.
Rookie of the race last weekend at Daytona. Again, Larry talked about it, how well the Rouse Fenway cars ran last week, and included his 6 car, David Reagan. Great effort.
He's not only one of the guys that did the double duty in one day, but he completed every lap of both of those races. So a pretty busy day for David last Saturday.
650 miles.
Walk in the park if you're young and,
I guess,
you know, in shape.
And, you know, I talked to his crew chief, Jimmy Finning, of course, who has been around for years. And you know, you don't see a lot of excitement in Jimmy Finning at no time. But when I talk to Jimmy, he's excited about this young man. And I think what he's really excited about is they make the second trip around to a lot of the racetracks they were together the first part of the season. You can just see that he feels like that this young man will really step up the performance as we get to the second half.
Ralph Shaheen, how about Jimmy Johnson?
Well, boy, you know, things are really going pretty good down here with Jimmy Johnson. They're feeling very comfortable with their race car. In fact, he said the key to it right now is it's very good on turn-in. When he turns that wheel after hauling down the back straightaway, that car sticks nice and solid on corner entry. Now, the center of the corner and getting off the corner is a little bit different story. It's not bad, but guys, it really all kind of backs up to that center of the corner. What they really want to do here, Jeff, is get this car to rotate just a little bit better for him. He said he could probably give up a little of that corner entry to try to gain it in the middle of the turn, but then you start hedging whether or not, how far do we go, and do I really want to give up that corner entry to get better in the center?
And, you know, that's a fine line right there, because I always believed if you get a car into the turn good, then the driver can help you get it off the turn. I mean, that's the key thing. He can play with the throttle maybe just a little bit, work on the steering wheel as far as how much input he gives it. But if you get in a car where you give up too much on entry, it can really mess you up. As you see right now that Jimmy's talking to Jeff Andrews right there, an engine specialist, head engine guy in a black hat. And Larry, looks like Lance McGrew with the clipboard.
Ron Malik
right there, who is the interim crew chief while Chad Canals is out. But they've got the whole, basically the brain trust of the 48 car right there. And they all at least are smiling, guys. I mean, so it all must be going well.
And this will be the halfway point for Steve Letarte and Chad Canals, their 6th race suspension. They will be returning in mid-August when we get to Michigan.
Lance McGrew talking to Danny Emmerich, one of the engine tuners. And guys, let's take a moment right now on behalf of everyone with this network and inside the NASCAR community to extend our condolences and sympathies to the family of Lisa France Kennedy. Her husband, Bruce, was killed in a plane crash earlier this week, along with a NASCAR pilot, and 3 other folks lost their lives on the ground. So our thoughts and prayers with all those families.
NXL Cup Series practice continues live from the Chicagoland Speedway. Clint Boyer just climbed from his car. He climbed to as high as 2nd on the scoreboard. Still working all on qualifying trim for later this afternoon, which you'll see qualifying live right here on Speed. His car just too free on entry and too tight on exit. Going back and making more changes in the front spindle area. Also, one other thing that we're starting to hear more and more about, teams looking at decisions of whether going with sticker, meaning brand new tires, or scuffs. We've reached the halfway point during this practice session, so they're able now to start A and B, just the tire selection for later on this afternoon, guys.
And here's what I think's going on. Matt mentioned changing a spindle. You can just barely see that spindle right there. And with him being loose getting in, what these teams do is you talk about kingpin angle. I don't want to get too technical here, but it's basically the angle of these 2 ball joints. The more kingpin angle you put, like up to 11 degrees, it makes the car turn. But the downside, it can make the car loose getting in. I'd be willing to bet they're taking kingpin angle out of that left front and equaling the kingpin angle left front and right front up to make the thing get down in the corner.
Get down more comfortably. And again, when you think about that, folks, you ever seen a motor grader that the state uses, when you see those wheels kind of cocked angle, that's kind of like what we're talking about. It helps that turn make that piece of equipment turn. Same principle when it comes to race cars. And take a look right here at one of the guys, go or go home. The 36 car, he is pretty decent right now as far as that's concerned. Right about he's almost, well, he's 20th on the board, but more importantly, as far as that number is concerned, he is really number 7 in the go or go home list. So that's what you got to be looking at, because there's a race within the race every week when we show up at the racetrack. And right now, Jeremy Merrifield is definitely caught up in it. And here's another one. Here's Kenny Wallace in the 78 car. And for these guys, especially from last week, Jeremy was one of the guys along with Kenny. They were up in a position to make that race before the rain came, and had to go home disappointed without having an opportunity to race.
But what we'll see here, we see it every week during this practice session, is you've heard Matt and Ralph talk about a lot of the guys that are locked in. It's an hour-and-a-half practice. They'll spend the first hour working on qualifying. Then those guys will kick into qualifying mode. Right now, we have a lot of go-or-go-homers up in the top 20. We actually have about 7 of them. But I think what you'll see the last 30 minutes of this practice session, you'll see it really start to change. You see Kevin Harvick, Clint Boyer, teammates talking to each other. Kevin Harvick, as Matt pointed out, won the first 2 races here in 01 and 02.
So it's got to be one of those favorite places for him. And particularly, but Larry, as we take a look here at Robbie Gordon, Robbie, I believe also he's been working on his race setup, run quite a few laps, but he now looks like he's got some tape on the front grill, maybe making a qualifying run. But a week ago, this is a different scenario here at Chicagoland, because you can change your setup. Last week was an impound deal. What you qualified is what you had to race, but you come here to Chicagoland, you have definitely a race setup, and you got a qualifying setup, and that's where all these guys are moving toward right now in the final part of this race practice, is getting the car where you can make a good qualifying effort.
Larry, Mark Martin has a busy weekend
But I talked to Mark this morning. He is so pumped up right now. You see his crew chief, Ryan Pemberton, there clocking Mark Martin. As soon as qualifying's over tonight, he's going to jump on a helicopter, go to the airport, and fly down to Iowa Speedway, where for the first time he will actually run the first of the 3 legs, 3 different drivers, in the Daytona prototype race that they're going to race at Iowa Speedway tonight. Mark went and tested it. He said, man, it's amazing.
Got light years to go. A whole lot. The more you do, the harder I'll drive it.
Mark Martin right now looks like maybe that was a practice qualifying run. He's 10th quickest. And I know this car right here, he kept walking around it this morning. It's an older chassis with a brand new body. And he was talking to me about this race tonight, but he just kept walking around going, man, I love the body on this car. Don't this car look good, Larry Mack?
Kyle Busch has bumped Jimmy Johnson from atop the speed charts. More practice here on Speed. Carburetor.
That's Booty Barker, crew chief of this number 70 car driven by Johnny Sauter.
It fascinates you the way he says that.
And our fans love to hear him say it on NASCAR Performance. We get emails about it.
That's great. Had some activity atop the speed charts. Kyle Busch in the 5 car. Now Martin Truex Jr. has jumped into the 2nd position.
And as we watch the 70 car, he just went from about 29th to 12th.
Also, Bill Elliott has jumped up into the top 7. Bobby Labonte 8th. His teammate, Johnny Andretti, is 10th.
Hold the phone. The Rocket Man just took off. Top of the list right now.
He won.
And, you know, as we've been going through this practice session, Ralph was talking about Kyle Busch a while ago. Matt Yoakum was talking about Clint Boyer, Jamie McMurray, about not a huge difference in qualifying mode and race mode here. I think the 3 or 4 big things would be, besides putting fresh tires on and putting tape on that nose for maximum downforce, the lowest drag on the straightaway. From a stand-up standpoint, you probably would put a stiffer right front spring in to qualify, because you're belling that thing down in the corner with the tape on the nose. Another thing they'll do is they'll move all the lead forward in the frame rail to get maximum front percentage. That helps keep the car snug as well. And probably you'll do other things with air pressure. And you saw, I think, the 26 car changing shocks, a little more aggressive shock package to qualify as well. Probably take these guys maybe 10 to 15 minutes if they're really organized to swap it over from one configuration to the other.
And Larry, one other thing I want to add right now as we watch David Rudham in the 00 car, I think that a lot of determination is being made now. Now these guys have gone to their qualifying setups of whether they're going to wind up scuffing their tires and making sticker runs. I mean, they'll go out and maybe make a sticker run and say, hey, the car really felt good, or they'll say, no, we need to knock the new off of it, and you'll see some guys maybe do some of that. Let's see what David does here. I'm pretty sure he's on a qualifying attempt right now to see what he can do. He's 29th presently, and he needs to pick up some speed.
You know, watching David Rudeman, not many starts here in the Busch Series, first start in a Cup Series. Of course, David come from the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. We were certainly talking about our well wishes and prayers going out to the families of Bruce Kennedy, Michael Clem, and the families of the victims down there in Florida. Our hearts and prayers go out to the family of Dennis James, the flagman for a number of years in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, passed away this week of a heart attack. So certainly our thoughts and prayers go out to that family and to the entire NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series division.
And Lisa France Kennedy, the daughter of Bill France Jr., he passed away recently. So, and she's the president of ISC, the International Speedway Corporation, which is a separate division of NASCAR. So, tough time for the France family.
Chicagoland Speedway, along with Kansas Speedway, Lisa France Kennedy's baby doll. She's the one that ramrodded these projects that both these tracks opened in 2001.
Paul Menard is the fastest right now, the go or go home drivers, 5th fastest overall.
You know, I talked
a little bit loose in and a little bit loose off.
We can handle that. If she's rotating good, we can fix that. But I talked to Dave Charpentier this morning, the crew chief for Paul Menard, and it looks like they have got the go-ahead that Dave Charpentier will stay the crew chief for this race team, because they've told him we're all set for 2008. We're going to have Paul on our trackside show tonight. We'll talk to him about that. But Dave now is starting to make changes because he feels like now I'm no longer the interim crew chief. I'm the permanent crew chief here.
Jimmy Johnson out on the racetrack in that 48 car, and he has not won a cup race here, but what a spectacular record. His worst finish here is 6th in 5 starts.
And he is the track record holder here. We talked about it earlier, set it 2 years ago at over 188 miles an hour. It looks like possibly that track record may be safe. Ryan Newman right now a second off that track record. But trust me, when they start laying them down this afternoon, business a pickup here.
I know last week there were a lot of fans disappointed when we didn't get to finish qualifying, and not to mention Boris said and some of the other guys that had put up good laps, but no threat of rain here today.
Still tight in 3 and 4.
He said good in 1 and 2, tight in 3 and 4.
And they're totally different ends. We talked about it. Jeff talked about that a while ago.
Front row, Joe Nemechek, the number 13 car, listed 13th fastest in this practice.
Talked to his crew chief this morning, Peter Suspenzo. He said, Larry Mack, it can't rain for 40 days and 40 nights. Our luck is just absolutely terrible right now.
It happens like that every now and then, Larry. Things you get into a rut, and all of a sudden it's just like no matter what you do, it just turns out wrong. And so looking to turn things around here. Second half of the season coming up. Time to get things going.
It's a new beginning.
New beginning.
Clint Boyer looking for his first NASCAR Nextel Cup victory. Could it come this weekend at Chicagoland? Right now, after you saw that team changing spindles on the 07, he is 12th quickest.
I thought it was going to come last week. When you look at the problems they had the ignition box problem, fell way back. He got it swapped over, led 60-something laps down there, just 55 laps actually, finished 7th. I thought it was his night to get his first win.
If it won't come this weekend, it's going to come soon, because I think the thing that I've heard you guys say for so many years, if you put your position in to win, you'll win, and that's what they're doing.
They're on a weekly basis. You just got to get up there and give yourself an opportunity to do a couple things. I want to take advantage of somebody else's mistakes, but also get up there where you can see what people are doing to be able to get to victory lane. As we take a look at Tony Raines, I'm sure this team right here, the Hall of Fame group, would love to be able to get him up in a position where they could possibly get to victory lane, because with the owners they've got, Bill Saunders, Troy Aikman, Roger Staubach, they know what winning is all about.
Well, they got work to do because of the 48 cars that has been out there, Jeff. Right now he's 47th quickest. He's run 13 laps in this practice session.
A.J. Allmendinger in the 84 right now is the slowest of the go or go home cars in his Toyota, 42nd overall.
Did not get to race last week at Daytona. They've actually missed the last 2 or 3 shows, so the biggest thing they're wanting to do is just qualify.
Matt Yoakum's been following the Kurt Busch story. What's going on, Matt?
Steve, just under 30 minutes left in this practice session. Kurt has made his way inside the cockpit of the race car. They are working on the timing of the engine. They're going to get a chance to get out, run some laps. And it's like Kurt said, we were talking about how the fact that it had to happen, at least they found the issue before he went out to start this practice session. So he's got a solid 30 minutes to get a good idea where this Blue Deuce is in the big scheme of things before qualifying.
And Matt, what makes that even more important, this is a brand new race car. It has still not seen the asphalt of a racetrack, so not only does he have 30 minutes to figure out what he needs for qualifying, Jeff, you know it and I know it, could always be a little new car blues here.
You could run into problems right there with fender rubs. You never know. But the other thing, guys, when you think about it like this, at least his teammate, Ryan Newman, knows how to get around this racetrack fast. So if they've got anything they can pull from that 12 car, it may help the Blue Deuce.
Ralph Shaheen.
Well, the 26 of Jamie McMurray is cooling the engine down. They're going to make one more suspension adjustment. They're pretty happy with their race trim. They're going to get ready to do a little qualifying try here in a minute. But, one of the things I was wondering about, guys, Larry and Jeff, you guys both won a lot of big races in your career. And I remember last weekend in Daytona interviewing Larry Carter no sooner than the checkered flag had fallen on this number 26, and they had their first win of the year. And Larry just looked like somebody had run over his dog. And I asked him, I said, well, you sure don't look too happy for a guy that just won. He said, you know what? We got another race next weekend. How long did you guys usually go as crew chiefs enjoying what you just accomplished before you started to get your game face back on? And how much time did you give your guys to enjoy that feeling as well?
Man, that's a tough one, Ralph. I mean, because, again, you're kind of like the captain of this group. And you got to understand, yes, you want to battle but you're really in a war. And they're trying to figure out right now, the war is making an opportunity to get up there and be in that chase for that championship. And that's where this guy and this crew chief are trying to pull this off. As we take a look at Jimmy Murray beating the 5 car by, I mean, you hate to say by inches. I mean, it was just by
5/1000
of a second and inches to go along with it. But that's the key thing, and he's exactly right. I mean, once you win that deal, it's a great feeling. But, Larry, you know, you've got to move on because, again, nobody's going to slow down for you as far as getting on to the next race.
And, Larry, the other humbling thing is he wins the race at Daytona right now. He's 44th fastest. Humbling.
But Steve, he's got new tires on.
Right. I believe they've been in race trim, and now they're going to qualifying trim. We see Kyle Busch right now, who is second quickest in this 5 car. But 2 things I want to point out, going back to what Ralph was talking about, Larry Carter. I think right now is these crew chiefs are also very uptight. When you sit on a pole or you win a race, you want to make sure that thing makes it through inspection and it's in that hauler, and then you know it's official without any issues, that the car was at the right height. That with about 25 minutes to go, we see Kurt Busch headed out on the racetrack. So I think that's one thing. The other thing, I actually talked to Larry Carter Wednesday night. We had him on our NASCAR Performance Live radio show, and he said, you know what? I'm happier now. He said, I think I was in a state of shock. I could not believe we actually won that race Saturday night. It took a couple of days before it actually set in.
And that could be also very true, because a lot of times you sit down and you think about, well, we got it done. Hey, that was cool. And then it starts kind of like sinking in after you read it and watch it on television a couple times. You know what? We really did do really well. We won the race.
Just got confirmation that Kurt Busch and the 2 car will, in fact, have to start the race in the final position, 43rd. So he got through an engine change, and he heads out onto the racetrack.
But Larry pointed out earlier, you still have the fact that you want to have a good qualifying position, because if you don't, then all of a sudden that could compromise your opportunity to win this race. I mean, just because you're going to start shotgun on the field, that doesn't mean all of a sudden to throw the towel and say, oh, we got a disastrous weekend and give up. Now's when you got to dig in and find out what you're made out of, because we need to go get a good qualifying run, brand new race car. The best way to turn a, kind of like the start of a bad weekend around, hey, is to go win a race.
Getting back to Ralph's question about how long do you enjoy a victory, I asked Mark Martin years ago, hey, you've never won the Daytona 500. What would it mean to win that race? And he said, the second I pull my car into victory lane, I'm going to start thinking about how I can win Rockingham next week.
Interesting point you bring that up is when we won it in 1989, we won the race, went through the post-race inspection, and I really didn't sink into me that we'd won the Daytona 500. It was when I was driving the van back from that racetrack about 2 a.m. I was headed up the road, listened to it on the radio, them talking about Darrell Waltrip winning a race, thinking about we really did accomplish this. But, I mean, you had to get back to the shop. We had to get going for the next race. There was no partying or celebrating back then. We didn't put our car in the museum because there wasn't one at that time.
Yeah.
So you had to get on and get moving on because Rockingham was coming.
Now, Kurt Busch has completed 1 lap, and it was 31:47. That's about almost 1 3/4 second off what Ryan Newman, his teammate, ran. Now, we'll see if I'm sure he'll pick up on his second lap here and see what he can do here. Again, first laps this race car has seen a race track whatsoever, 31:09, so he's still a couple of tenths off the next slowest car, which is Casey Kane in the 9 right
But
now.
I'm a whole lot happier seeing him do that than just jump out there and just go at it, like he's trying to make a qualifying run. It is a brand new race car. He needs to feel his way into it, and he can get faster. I know Kurt Busch, and when it comes time to lay down a good lap, he'll be able to do it.
Larry, Mack, how many races did you and Davey Allison win together?
Gosh, I won 25 total, 23 total, and, about half of those races were with Davey Allison.
Well, not to be, on a downer this show, but reality of life is the same for everybody. We lost Davey Allison 14 years ago today. That's hard to believe.
It really, really is. And, people ask me all the time, what would Davey be doing? Where would he be? And I've always said, well, you know what? He'd have won a lot more races. And there may be guys that has championships that wouldn't have them if that hadn't happened.
We'll be right back to Chicago. FoxSports.com and SpeedTV.com form the most powerful online team in NASCAR. For breaking news, in-depth analysis, detailed driver stats, and more, log on to SpeedTV.com now.
Hey, you know who makes us look good on that FoxSports.com?
Stu Hodem.
Stu Hodem.
Stu Hodem.
Tell you
Man
right
that never
now.
sleeps, works all the time.
And Tom Jensen at SpeedTV.com does a great job as well.
We're looking at Carl Edwards here in the 99 car. This is the same car that he won with at Michigan a few weeks ago. And Carl has quietly worked his way up into the top 6 in points. He's 6th in the points right now. He's run 23 laps in this practice session. This is a practice qualifying run. He just jumped up to 18th quickest at a 29.98.
Got the win at Michigan 4 races ago, finished 4th in Daytona last week.
And he's actually the fastest of the Roush Fenway cars so far, but I get a feeling there's some of his, like his teammates, Matt Kenseth, they've maybe not went to that qualifying trim just yet.
Dale Earnhardt Jr. is 12th in points and having a pretty good practice, Ralph.
Well, he is, Steve, but, you know, this is one of those areas where things get a little bit tricky. You kind of got to reach back into that book of knowledge for the crew chief to see what you can figure out here, because he says it feels like it's kind of free, but then again, maybe it's not really free. It kind of feels more like the sidewalls are moving around, guys.
Sidewalls. How do you fix that?
Deal with it.
Shut up and drive, right?
Because that's one of those things right now that you can't do a lot about whenever you get one of those situations where you feel that through with the good years that have been basically brought here. As we take a look at Dale Earnhardt Jr. Spent a little time right there with Max Siegel and his crew chief Tony Eury Jr.
This is the second week back for Tony Eury Jr. See him standing there in front of Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Max Siegel. But, you know, talking about this new generation of tire, this is the same tire package that we raced at Texas back in the spring. Let's go back to the Evernham cars. I talked to Ray extensively at Lowe's Motor Speedway. He said, you know, Larry, everyone's wanting to blame our struggles on the new Dodge Charger nose. As we see Casey Kane out there right now, 48 fastest of our 49 cars. He said, I think the biggest thing that we have really missed the boat with all 3 of our teams and drivers is we've not got our arms around this new feel, this new generation of Goodyear tire. And I think that pretty much was backed up a few weeks ago because, you know what, they brought the old Charger nose on the 9 car and the performance was not a whole lot better or any different at all.
Larry, I want to back up just a minute and go back to Dale Earnhardt Jr. We were taking a look at a minute ago, an 8-car driver, and you see him there with Max Siegel. You got to give DEI a lot of credit right now, guys, because when we talked about Dale Earnhardt Jr. leaving this group, that it possibly could implode. But to the contrary, all of a sudden, Martin Truex Jr., he goes to Dover, he wins. A lot of good things seem like have come out of this basically divorce, or the fact that he is leaving. They've worked extra hard to make certain that Dale Earnhardt Jr. gets into the chase for the championship, that Martin Truex Jr. gets in the chase for the championship. And I think that shows a sign of a mature and great leadership there at DEI, because it'd be real easy, and it's great to see Max there. He and Dale Earnhardt Jr. discussing things that look like got smiles on their faces, but a great tribute, I think, for the whole organization, because they've had some tough times, and particularly losing Tony Eury Jr. for those races. I mean, they could have easily folded up, but they haven't done it.
And I agree with Jeff. And, of course, time will only tell. But I honestly believe at the end of the day, as we get into 2008, about this time next year, I think we possibly will be able to say, gosh, what a great move it was for both parties, Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Dale Earnhardt Incorporated.
Making the best of a bad situation.
Ryan Newman, the Rocket Man, is fastest in this practice. He's run 19 laps. We'll be back to Chicagoland right after this. The 5th, hauling the mail around the Chicagoland Speedway, that number 16 car, Roush Fenway Racing. 29th in this practice session. Yes, Mr. Affleck?
Those are some good commercials.
They're
really
funny.
Are good commercials.
They are funny.
He had a great run at Daytona last week, finished 6th, and right now, I don't mean to shortcut Greg Biffle, Greg Irwin, but right now he's 16th in the points. I just think it's going to be a stretch for this group to get there for several reasons. They've not been performing that well at some of the racetracks. Plus, I think the obstacles in between he and the top 12 right now, which is the 26, the 12, and the 2 car.
You know what commercial I like?
What's that?
The little Geico commercial with Warren Wallace. I'm not saying I wouldn't go fishing with the man, Ralph.
You know, I don't know about those 2 guys sitting next to you, Steve Burns, but down here, you know, when you meet Bono Mannion, he comes across as kind of a quiet, calm kind of guy, soft-spoken kind of guy, but it turns out he's quite the little prankster. He's got his driver, Martin Truex, sitting inside the number 1 down here. They've been about number 4 on the speed chart. They're very happy with their setup. Martin's kind of asking, hey, man, I'd really like to get some stickers on this thing, go out there and see if we can't take a run at the pole. And Bono just kind of looked at the car, walked around a little bit and said, nah, you know, it's got to be nice and warm inside that car. Why don't you just sit there for a little while we let this thing cool down and we'll let you go back out there. And then he just got that Cheshire grin on his face and walked off. So the crew chief taking one on the driver today.
Oh, I love it when a driver gets put in his place by a crew chief.
Jeff Burton in the 31 car. Let's take a look at where he is in this practice right now. Looking at our scoring monitor, 6th overall for Jeff Burton.
Just made a qualifying run right there and jumped up there to 6th quickest.
Now, he sat on the Bud pole here a year ago and actually finished 2nd. Jeff comes in here 5th in the Nextel Cup points.
Led 60 laps a year ago to win the race.
You know, he was a qualifying machine last year, guys, when you think about it. He always up around the pole position every week.
Captain Friday, right?
Exactly right. He just all of a sudden surprised us. Where's he been so far this year, guys?
Qualifying hadn't been what it was a year ago, but as we said, he's still up there in the thick of this chase for the Nextel Cup Championship that will start here in about 8 races after Richmond.
For a long time in this practice session, Bobby Labonte was in the top 5, then top 10 right now, 18th overall.
And I get a feeling when I look at the number of laps, that's kind of the telltale sign as to who's been working on race setup, who's been working on qualifying setup. I think Paul Andrews, Bobby Labonte, they've been in qualifying trim this entire practice session because a lot of teams they've run in the 20s and even close to 30-something laps. This team has only run 8 laps with this 43 car.
Matt's got an update on J.J. Yaley, 26th overall.
12 minutes left in this session. Now, they've had some great comparison between sticker, meaning new, and also scuff tires where you run a heat cycle through them. Basically, they feel like their car better on scuff. So what JJ is going to do at this juncture, the game plan, is to go back out, run 1 lap, but not at full speed, just to knock the new off the tires, but not put a drastic heat cycle through them, and come back in, and that will be his set that he'll go out and qualify on later this afternoon.
Jeff, the biggest thing, they don't want to abuse any of those tires in scuffing them in. In other words, you don't want to shove the nose and slide the fronts or get loose and slide the rears. You just, as Matt said, knock that newness off.
Just want to make them kind of like, as you were talking earlier about how the sidewalk gives a little bit of a funny feel. By running these tires around, it kind of settles that down, at least in a lot of people's minds. That's a good thing about scuffing a set of tires in. It makes that tire kind of like take a set, to where when the driver goes back out, he's got more confidence he can drive it off in the turn.
Sounds like something Larry Mack could talk about on NASCAR Performance.
With Woody Barker and Jimmy Elledge right now.
When does it air this week?
Ted Lakaitis is going to let me know, hopefully, before we go off there with this practice.
Ricky Rudd missed the first 15 minutes of practice. He is 42nd overall out of 49. Kurt Busch has been on the racetrack. Matt's been following that story. Busch has 7 laps of practice.
This is the same car Ricky Rudd had when he finished 7th at Lowe's Motor Speedway. There you see J.J. Yaley. Matt Yoakum talked about it. Looks like he went out and ran that one semi-hard lap just to buff those tires in, so they should be ready to qualify now.
Kevin Harvick, 6th overall in that 29 car, 2-time winner here on this mile-and-a-half Chicagoland Speedway.
And I think he just completed a little qualifying effort, and looks like he's making it 2 laps here, but on his first lap jumped up to 6th quickest.
It's the $1 million car right there. It's the car he won the Nextel All-Star Challenge with back in May.
I'd have put that bad boy in a museum.
Hey, Matt, what's the follow-up on Kurt Busch?
Well, Steve, he's run 2 runs so far, 3 and a 4-lap run. On the first run, like Larry Mack and Jeff mentioned, just a shakedown of a brand new race car. He came back in, he was giving them readings as far as the oil pressure, the fuel pressure. He also said, you know, there is a little bit of smoke in here, but guys, you can comment on that in a minute. When you have a new car, so many parts and pieces, brand new paint, some parts, they burn off like the tailpipes. He says the car is tight. They made a sway bar change, also a shock change, sent him back out, waiting to hear how the car is now.
And, you know, that's the thing. That brand new race car, 18 races to go. 8 of those 18 races will be the car tomorrow, but 10 will be with this car right here, and I think that's the reason it's still going to be a very hectic second half of the season, because you know what? Half of the chase races with this old current car, these teams, Robbie Reiser and I talked about it this morning, Matt Kenseth's crew chief, you can't quit working on this current car because you know you have to have every I dotted, every T crossed for those 5 races that has this car in the chase.
You can't give up anything right now, Larry, and in particular this 2 car. If he wants to climb up here and have a shot at it, he's going to have some solid runs really quick. And again, we've been watching this 1 car sit in the garage area, and let's see, looks like he is going to wind up being.
He actually didn't run as fast as he had a while ago. He slowed down about a tenth, so he's still 4th quickest.
Ryan Newman still the fastest here in Chicagoland. We'll be right back here on Speed.
This copyrighted telecast may not be reproduced, retransmitted, or used in any form without the authorized written consent of NASCAR Broadcasting. NASCAR would like to thank all of our loyal fans for your continued support, and we hope you enjoyed today's broadcast.
Race car driver Kenny Wallace, the shy one, in the number 78 car.
See a little bit of smoke off the left front there, Larry, when he went off into turn 1.
And this is a brand new race car for this 78 bunch. And I have breaking news, NASCAR performance with old Larry Mack,
7 p.m.
Booty Barker, 7 p.m. Eastern time on Saturday. We're going to talk about sway bars, coil binding, front shocks, all the things that can make you or break you here at Chicagoland Speedway.
Sway bars or track bars? Which one is it?
Sway bars.
Okay.
Track bars where you hang out after practice.
Well, working with you would drive anybody to drink.
Matt Yoakum's going to talk about not sway bars, but the 12 car.
And at the front is where Newman's pretty much been spending his time over the past 7 races. I mean, think back, Larry Mack, and we've talked about it many times. Over the first 11 races, Newman had 1 top 5 start. Over the last 7, he's won 3 poles, and 7 straight races he's qualified in the top 15. This team has really had a major turnaround. They won the Pit Crew Championship back in May, and that was just a springboard as this team continues to gain momentum. Right now, he says the car is tight, trying to knock down another pole. They're making another change with this number 12 machine, but the bigger issue, trying to lock it down, top 12 in points. Right now, he is 61 markers out of the chase.
And I believe this team will make it. Who are they going to replace? I have not a clue. But I believe that 12 team will be in the chase for the Nextel Cup Championship.
His teammate, Kurt Busch.
And this guy here may have something to say about that.
But, Jeff, you were talking at break a while ago. That penalty, would they love to have that 100 points back from Dover?
Yeah, he's 121 points out of that 12th position, what everybody's gunning for right now. He'd get that 100 points back. He'd only win 21 points, have to make it up, and that really put him in the catbird seat with 8 races to go.
And we're seeing exactly what we anticipated. Now, of our go-or-go-homers, Dave Blaney being the fastest, we only have 4 of them in the top 30. So now our top 35, they're starting to lay down those practice qualifying runs.
It's been an incident-free practice. Everybody in good shape with the exception of Kurt Busch, who had to change a motor. He will have to start 43rd come Sunday's race. Jimmy Johnson was the fastest. As you take a look at the rest of the practice feeds, this practice comes to an end. Thanks for being with us here on Speed. Don't forget, Bud Bowl qualifying later today.